Hello, this is Katie. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if it's your first time. We are going to do a make a card with me play along, so grab a drink and let's get started. All right, so we're just going to start with an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock. I'm just using the Michaels 110-pound cardstock, and then I'm going to cut that into a card base. This will give me 2. I'm cutting it at 5.5. And then I am going to score it on my Martha Stewart scoreboard at 4.25. I'm just going to score both of them so I have a backup card base, but we're only going to be making one card today. So now that you have scored, you can go ahead and fold, or you can just fold your cardstock in half and burnish it. If you don't have a scoreboard or you don't use one, that's fine. I'm going to trim off this little lip that always seems to happen so I can get it down to 4.25 by 5.5 without that hanging over. So I've decided I'm going to turn this the other way and have my card open, kind of like a top opening, but the wider version. I'm going to go ahead and pick a background pattern paper. So any pattern paper you have or like, whatever you would like. And I'm using a piece from Hoppy Easter by Doodlebug Design. So we want to trim this down to 4.25 by 5.5 so it fits the background. And then you can just trim the paper down and stick it down. You don't have to make it any fancier, but I'm going to go ahead and use one of these piercing backgrounds and just pierce the diagonal stitching with the squares, or diamonds, I guess, how you look at it, onto the background. So I'm going to first trim this down to 4.25 by 5.5 since that die doesn't cut this one out like the Lawn Fawn one does. It does the stitching only, so I'm going to go ahead and center this and then run that through my die cutter. And then you can stick your background down to your card base. You can either use liquid adhesive or a dry adhesive, as they call it, which is really like tape runner. I'm going to use that. You can use score tape, whatever you want to use to stick it down. I use a lot of adhesive. And keep in mind, if you do have any piercing in the background and you use liquid adhesive, the glue might come through those little tiny holes. All right, so now we have our background card base. And so usually how I make a card when I don't really have a plan is to have a background and then kind of mat it like a picture. So I have rectangle on rectangle, and I usually lift up that second one on foam. And then that's the rectangle that has my sentiment, my images, and things like that. So if you want to cut a rectangle, or if you have die cuts like this, then whatever you'd like to do is fine. And then just pick a stamp set that has images as well as at least one sentiment. And I'm going to pick this Flower Bouquets by Pretty Pink Posh. And then I'm going to kind of create a diagonal background, and I recommend doing this as well if you want to play along. I found smaller floral images from the Easter set from Pretty Pink Posh, and I stuck with the same company because I knew that their images would look similar, same style basically. So the flowers are going to look similar to the flowers coming out of the bouquet, for example. And then just grab a really light colored ink and kind of create this bottom left to top right diagonal pattern of a few little images. And if you chose something else, if you're making a Halloween card, a Christmas card, find small Halloween images, small Christmas images, whatever you want to do. And then kind of build off of that, and you can overlap as well. Just make sure you're using a variety of the few images that you chose. And then once you have it looking how you want it, I think that might be where I ended. You can set those aside. We can always clean our stamps later. Then I'm going to go ahead and put the sentiment in the upper left and maybe come in a little bit from the upper left. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on a stamp block. And I'll just do it in black ink so that stands out. And then our image will be in black ink as well. So just so it's not too far in the upper left, kind of bring it and maybe overlap it on your light colored ink little diagonal background you made. Then here I'm just kind of holding over the bouquets to see which one I think would sit better on the card in the bottom right corner. So I settled on kind of the biggest one, the wider one. So we're going to stamp that out. And I'll stamp it out a couple times. I didn't want to get out my stamp platform, and some of you may not have a stamp platform. Usually what I do is just stamp one good one, and then my second image is usually good to color in. So I'm going to go ahead and color in that second one. Just waving around the paper a little bit to make sure the ink has a moment to dry. And then I'm going to use my tri-blends. Honestly, I reach for these a lot. I do have many Copics, but I didn't want to think of color combinations or come up with them. Unless I'm given color combinations and I happen to have the colors, it's not as easy for me to come up with those and use my Copics probably as much as I should. So I'm going to use the tri-blends that come with the blend in one marker of 3 different colors, and then blend this like a spherical shape. So I'm going to have that light centered in the middle on the front and just kind of wing the rest of it. And I wanted to leave all this coloring in, especially if you are playing along and creating a card at home with me, if you have some coloring to do. Of course, you're welcome to color however you want. If you want to use watercolor, colored pencils, markers, alcohol markers, whatever you have. Hoping that this video will help you kind of just reach for some supplies and make something. That's why I leave it open to pick any pattern paper you have, any stamp set you have, images, etc. Just to give you a basic idea to kind of create a card. So we've got 3 different kinds of leaves coming out of this watering can. That's what they're called, right? And so I'm going to do this green for all the leaves that look the same, and then my next green, and then a third green. I really like a lot of these combinations. There are definitely some markers I reach for more than others, but I have also come to love some of them that I didn't used to reach for and didn't used to like in the beginning, because I ended up using them a little bit, and they do look better when you combine them. And then I'm going to use the Alpine green. I think this is my favorite green. It's just very vibrant. In this case, these leaves are so tiny, I'm really just doing a dot of each color. And you can always use a black micron pen to go over any lines that didn't quite fully stamp on your image. And I had already put my marker away for some reason, so I had to go grab it again because I got distracted by fixing that little line. So all the greens are done. This pale pink shades is definitely a favorite. So I'm trying to kind of address each petal individually. Excuse me, I had a sneeze. To make sure it doesn't come out looking like a circle. So I wanted to make sure I was kind of fanning out each petal to make that look a little more natural, even though it's definitely a drawn flower. So I really like the pale pink shades. I also really like Coral Blend. In these marker, the shades are like the darker version, because there's a pale pink blend as well that I use on the third flower. There's Coral Shades, and then this is Coral Blend. The blend is the lighter version. The shades is the darker version. So if you wanted to do even like a 4 or more color blend, you could do it with like 2 markers. Pale pink shades and pale pink blend, coral shades, coral blend, etc. There's a dark red shades and a dark red blend. Those are really pretty as well. I'm just sticking with pink because the background pattern paper on my card is pink. So I didn't want to throw any like purple in here and have it throw it off. So I just picked my favorite pinks, and then I'm going to go ahead and die cut that out. So now we've got our 3 pieces, our card base with our pattern paper, our rectangle with some stamped background images, and our sentiment in the upper left. I'm going to lift mine up on foam tape. You can just stick yours straight down, especially if you're going to mail it. I tend to avoid foam tape if I'm going to be mailing something. Not only because it makes it kind of thicker and I feel like I have to add extra postage, but because when I do it like this, the mail kind of squishes it and you can see lines that get pressed in between these foam tapes, which is why using fun foam, like sheets of fun foam, would be a better idea. But the mail tends to mess with it. So you can lift that up or not. And then you can stick your image down. I'm going to just use my tape runner. If an image is big enough on the back, and you can kind of move dry adhesive around like I am right here. If an image is big enough on the back, I'll just use tape runner instead of glue because I don't want to fight with my glue. So here, because it's hanging off a little bit, I can cut tiny little pieces of foam tape and peel off all the backing. And then take a pair of tweezers instead of trying with your fingers like I was, and kind of slide it under there to give it some support. And I end up adding a little one to the tip of the watering can as well. So that can help support your cards, especially if they are going to be going through the mail. Anything kind of hanging off the edge. And then if you are a white accenter type of person, you can take your white gel pen and add any accents that you want. I probably should have tapped this pen down a little bit better. It is a 10, and the reason I bought the 10s was because the 8 was too thin. And I had already drawn some lines before I tapped it out, and it got a little juicier, I guess you could say. So I try to go over some of the other ones, but you know that when you draw over a white line, you just pick up the ink almost like you're erasing it. So I was trying to kind of fix that. And of course, I put my hand in one of them and smudge them because I cannot avoid that no matter what I do. And then that will be it for the card. So hopefully you were able to make something, make one card, grab a card base, throw a background on it, get a rectangle, and find a stamp set with sentiments or a sentiment and at least some images. And make something. And if you do, I will leave all my information down below, and you can tag me on Instagram, whatever you want, and let me know what you made. And thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.